Good morning and welcome to Australian Stories, Tourism Australia's new webinar series created for our UK and European partners. I'm Sally Cope, Regional General Manager at TA in London. Our intention is to use this platform to showcase particular sectors of the Australian tourism industry and shine a light on our local heroes, uncovering the stories that make it a truly unique destination. In planning this series, we reached out to our distribution partners across the UK and Europe and asked what themes would most interest you. Top of the list was Australia's nature and wildlife. So we turned to one of our key industry partners in this field, John Dorr at Australian Wildlife Journeys, and asked him to create this first webinar in the series. Australia is blessed with some of the most intriguing species in the animal kingdom, and more than 80% of them are found nowhere else on Earth. Australian Wildlife Journeys is a group of family-owned tour operators committed to sharing experiences for travellers who are interested in encountering Australia's wildlife in the natural habitat. So before I hand over to John, just a few housekeeping points. First of all, please use the Q&A tab to ask questions of the panellists. And if we don't get to your question, we'll do our best to respond offline. And if you love the content, the webinar is being recorded and will be available to watch on demand. So we'll send you a link after the event that you can share with your colleagues. So I'd now like to warmly welcome John.
Hey, Sally, how are you? Great to be on the line with everyone, all our friends across UK and Europe. We're really delighted to kick off the Australian Stories series and really exciting to do something a little bit different with this format. So often we're trying to get through a presentation as quickly as we can and talk about the logistics and all the different experiences that are available. But for this one, we're going to be able to take a bit of a deeper dive into the characters and guides that make up Australian Wildlife Journeys, and also the legacy that they want to leave, which is really what makes me excited about my role as EO with Australian Wildlife Journeys. So with that being said, I'm now going to introduce our fabulous panel quickly before we kick off with the Q&A. So today we have Pia. Hello, Pia. How are you?
Hey, hi, John.
And Nakita over in Western Australia. We have Janine Duffy, based in Melbourne with Echidna Walkabout Nature Tours. Hello, Janine. And last but not least, James Boettcher from FNG Nature Tours.
Good morning.
So we're going to circle back with James and Janine in a little while, but we're going to kick it off across in beautiful Western Australia and Margaret River. Naturalist charters, of course, they have been operating for the best part of 20 years now. Spectacular marine eco adventures through that part of the world. Of course, the beautiful Margaret River and more recently, of course, Bramber Canyon. So excited to introduce both Pia and Nakita. Nakita is the office manager. She is also the go-to for any trade-related queries and also marketing. So a big thank you for joining us today. Nakita is going to take some questions at the end if you do have some as well. And Pia is fresh off the boat after spending the season with the orcas. We were extremely lucky to have her because that season just finished and she's about to embark on the Margaret River experiences very shortly. So we're thrilled to have May 5th as a date to ask some questions. Pia, I am going to kick it off with you, and most people on the line have probably heard about Naturalist charters, most likely because of the amazing orca expedition or Bremer Bay. But not too many of us probably know too much about the region, how it was discovered, because it's a fairly recent discovery in terms of science and tourism. So I was just hoping you could run through how it came about, how they discovered it, and the role that Naturalist charters played in that.
Yeah, so it's a really fascinating story how it all began. Basically, there was a whole number of things happening at the same time, a whole number of factors. So we had oil and gas were scoping out the area. We also had the very fascinating story of a tagged great white shark that went missing. And we had a filmmaker who was working on board a tuna research vessel in the area. And basically the filmmaker, Dave Riggs, he noticed that in this one area, every time they'd go past doing their research, there was always something happening. So there was birds, there was whales, there was dolphins, and that kind of kicked off the start of the killer whales being there or discovering that the killer whales are there. And then in about 9 years ago, Naturalist Charters got involved, and we began the tourism industry there. So the tours started, and we learn something new every season. So we've basically figured out the orcas are there from January through to April. Originally, we just thought they were there for 6 weeks, and now we're starting to change our tune each time. So there's lots and lots happening out there. Basically, Naturalist Charters are creating a baseline for the tourism industry into the future there. So everything that we discover, that's out there for the industry.
And what's the reason that there's just this huge congregation of marine species there? So I understand it's got the largest concentration of killer whales in the southern hemisphere that they think, but what's the reason that there's this massive food chain happening?
Yeah, well, basically to sustain about 200 killer whales in one area, there has to be a lot of other things going on. So there's these beautiful currents. There's 4 different currents that come in and all intersect in the area. There's changing topography, so there's deep canyon systems out there. We've got upwelling, so nutrients are being boosted up from cold Antarctic waters, and it's all creating this massive system, and then that kicks off the food chain.
Yeah, incredible. So I know that there's a fair bit of scientific study going on. So one of the things that I think is terrific is that you house research personnel on the boat, but obviously you're also involved as a marine biologist studying it day in, day out. So what are the sort of things that you're studying at the moment out at Bremer?
A lot of it's opportunistic. So if we see something out there, we'll just try and collect as much information about it as possible. Every day we're looking at water temperature and the weather conditions as well. But mainly it's just opportunistic. I mean, not even a month ago, we had a fin whale in Bremer hotspot in the area that we go to that's only been seen once before in the 9 years of our operation. We're creating a paper at the moment, a scientific paper with local researchers, and so Naturalist Charters are co-authoring that. And that was on blue whales and killer whales predations and all that kind of gory stuff as well.
So I'm glad you mentioned predations, because it is one of the unique things about Bremer is that you see orcas quite regularly hunting on other marine mammals. Mm-hmm. What did you discover this season? Because I understand it happened again recently with a blue whale, but beyond that, what sort of species spread do you get beyond the orcas? That's obviously what we talk mostly about, but there's a whole lot of different whales that pass through there. So could you give us an idea of the other species that you might see opportunistically?
Yeah, so we get sperm whales. So we're just creating a catalogue at the moment of these beautiful sperm whales. We've got false killer whales. We've got pilot whales. We've got 3 different species of dolphins that are very common in the area. The fin whale, blue whales, humpbacks, beaked whales, so like bird beak. They are this super rare, super mysterious whale that we know nothing about. They can hold their breath for up to 2 hours, and they're going down to 3,000 metres of water. So, there's lots and lots of stuff going on out there.
Yeah. And also pelagic birds. So as a bit of a bird watcher myself, I know that was a real highlight for me. But people who go out on the vessel, they're just amazed by the birds that you never really see apart from being out deep in the Southern Ocean or off the continental shelf. So what sort of things do you see out there? And again, what sort of surveys do you get to do out on board?
I knew you were going to ask about the birds.
Yeah.
Basically, we will obviously if the killer whales are hunting something, the birds are opportunistic feeders, so they're going to be hanging around if there's a bit of meat or oil in the water. We get birds that are migratory species that come from 10,000 kilometres away. There's these things that, birds that just are seen once in West Australia and never again, really. We work with researchers or bird researchers who will come out a couple of times in the season. So they'll do a summer and a winter study, and they're looking at species and why the birds are utilising that area. Is this going to be an important migratory area for these birds? Does it need more protection in the future? And I guess that's one thing that Naturalist Charters is doing really well is that we're bringing everyone in. We're bringing specialists in from so many different fields. So rather than it just being just killer whales, it can be everything.
Yeah, awesome. I'm going to move across because I could talk about Bremer Canyon all day, but I know that there's some other experiences through Margaret River that we're now turning into. And I should mention that up front, that you live in an amazing part of the world where you can go whale watching all year round, which I don't know if there's too many other places around the globe where you can. But we are heading into autumn down here, of course, and that means the start of the Margaret River season. But something I'm really interested in asking you is your work with blue whales. So obviously the world's largest creature, but a lot of people have probably never seen a blue whale before. So what have you discovered recently in terms of the blues that are passing through there?
Oh, the blue whales, every week there's something new. They are so mysterious. We've got blues coming through soonish, and they'll be migrating through. They use the calm waters of the bay as a bit of a resting area. They come through and they actually scratch their bellies along the sand and scratch off any bacteria. Obviously, they've only got small little flippers, so they can't scratch themselves. So they'll use the sand and the rocks to scratch off any germs and bacteria off their body. We're finding that the population is increasing. So every season that we monitor and that we work with local researchers, we're finding that the blue whale population is increasing, which is amazing. We're seeing calves every year, these really big, healthy whales coming through, which is, really, really good to see. We've just found, about a month ago as well, we had probably the smallest blue whale calf ever seen in West Australia. So it would have been less than a week old. It's about as big as a calf, a brand new born whale. But just things like that, opportunistically seeing stuff out there. If we're not out there, we're not going to see it. Yeah,
and the waters through there are so awesome for whale watching, and seeing the blue whales in this beautiful turquoise water. I can't wait to do it again next season. But blueies, that's amazing. I guess before we round it out, just talking about some of the opportunities that our guests from UK and Europe can get involved as well, because whale research is such a hot topic globally, and I think more and more people want to help out in terms of discovering what's out in the ocean. So how can they do that?
Well, basically everyone's got a camera these days. So if you've got a camera and you're out there, get a photo of it. Especially with blue whales, the identification photo is just of its back and its dorsal fin. If you can get a photo like that, and you can find a local researcher and submit the images. There's also online platforms as well. You can just Google it. It's super easy. But there's a lot of different avenues. I guess going out on a local whale watching boat as well, the guides will be able to tell you where to go, where to submit your images to, and then that all just helps looking at population-wise. Each blue whale has its own fingerprint, and that's on its. Doesn't seem right, but it's on its back. So a photo of its back that's unique to that whale, and we can compare them through the computers and look at population and the health of these whales as well.
Yeah, terrific. And just for my interest, how many blue whales are typically passing through that area do you project?
Last year we had 200. The season before we had 170, and the season before that about 130. So each year we're getting more and more. We could see on some tours 8 blue whales all moving together, or we might just get one.
Yeah. Oh, incredible. All right, well, thank you so much, Pia. Again, we probably don't have enough time to cover everything, but that was really, really insightful, and I certainly learned a lot. So thank you for sharing all that incredible info.
Thanks, Sean.
All right, so now we are going to change gears and we're going to head across to Victoria. And Janine Duffy, she needs no introduction for many of you online, I'm sure. She's been operating for the best part of 30 years now, and certainly one of Australia's most respected conservation travel operators. But not only Australia, it's one of the world's great conservation travel operators, having won the World Travel or World Responsible Travel Award some years ago. She's an absolute treasure. We're delighted that you can join us, Janine, because it's been a really hectic time. You had Wild Koala Day on May 3rd a couple of days ago, and before that you've been up at Bungalow helping the koalas up there. So thank you for your time today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, mate, and it's great to be here. And I'd love to say see you all, but I can't see you, but I can imagine.
Everyone's here in spirit too. So
yeah.
I know we've got a stack to talk about, and a lot of it revolves around koalas, of course. So Echidna Walkabout, you've been operating tours all across Victoria and now into Mungo as well, which we'll talk a bit more about. But koalas has been something that you've been involved with for many, many years. It's a huge passion in terms of studying and conservation, of course. I was hoping for those that might not be aware of your background story to share a little bit about how you got involved initially with koalas, and also, in addition to that, how you came across the identification technique that's now used as a benchmark for scientists.
Oh, I've worked with koalas my whole adult life, which is something that I'm extremely proud to be able to say now. And I did discover the method of telling them apart. So I was interested when Pia was talking about the fingerprint of the blue whales. So koalas have a fingerprint as well, which identifies them uniquely, and it's their noses. So I was walking through the bush looking up koalas' noses a lot. You know, I didn't have a social life, of course, in my 20s, and I discovered a way of telling them apart as individuals, which has become quite useful because it means that researchers can monitor animals individually throughout their whole lives without ever having to catch them, which is you know, terrific for the koala and also quite good for the researcher. But what it meant, John, is that I connected very strongly with a lot of individual animals, and I was extremely fortunate to be able to watch some koalas from tiny little joeys on their mother's belly all the way through their entire life. And we have a koala at the moment that some of you actually may have met, Pat, the mother of Clancy, and she's 16 years old this year. And I didn't think I'd ever know a koala for 16 years, but we've seen every part of her life, you know, which is amazing. But by 2005, I knew that there was something wrong. And in 2008, a paper came out telling me what was wrong with the koalas, and it's climate change. And in our areas, they're dying, they're declining, and it's just climate change. It's not fires necessarily. It's drought and it's heat waves and all of that sort of thing. So I've lived with this horrible knowledge for that long. And I'm actually a bit relieved that it's coming out, you know, that we're talking about it properly, that it's not hidden anymore, that we can finally do something about this. Because I'm watching trees die. And, you know, when trees die, koalas die. It's just the way it goes. Then, of course, you know, last year we had those terrible fires. And I think something broke in us when that happened. But I also think that if you're going to renew, sometimes something's got to break first. And, you know, you can probably apply that to this whole COVID situation. You know, maybe some things had to break so that we could renew.
I do want to follow that up, and I know it's been a pretty crazy 18 months for all of us with some of those issues that you just mentioned. I know that you've made some recent announcements, which some of the viewers online I'm sure have heard about, but I was hoping you could run through what those changes are and also the reasons that you've made those exciting changes, I think, in the longer term.
Well, firstly, we're on a mission. We're going to plant 300,000 trees by 2030. And to do that, We're getting everything involved. International travellers, when you come back, we want you. We need your hands. We're going to need as many pairs of hands as we possibly can get, because that is a huge total for one little organisation. But we're going to do it because this year we're doing 25,000 just around the Yuyangs, and we're having to rely on locals. So imagine what we can do when you guys can come back and help us. So we have started a bunch of new tours that are getting tree planting involved. The Koala Recovery Experience, I think some of you would have seen. We'll do that for 2 or 3 days, and it will be the most incredible experience. Now, it does mean bringing people to Melbourne in winter, but you know what? Melbourne winter is not that bad. And I think, you know, that travel is going to be a bit different when people do start to come back. We're getting a lot of people saying they want to come to where they can do the most good. And, you know, this is where you can do the most good. You come down to Melbourne between June and August and plant trees with us on the most gorgeous private farms. Meet the owners, play with their dogs and their sheep, and work with locals to plant trees in the morning and go for koala walks in the afternoon. I mean, I love it. Everyone who comes loves it. I think people from all over the UK and Europe are just going to think they've died and gone to heaven.
Oh, it sounds spectacular, and certainly looking forward to doing it myself. Not too far away, because that's in the winter months, of course, as you've mentioned. June, July and August. And, yeah, the opportunity to engage guests with that activity after the outpouring, it's, you know, real credit to Echidna Walkabout and yourself, of course. We've touched upon the Yuyangs. Also, East Gippsland, I briefly wanted to mention too, because I know a lot of people have been asking questions about that. How are you planning to get people involved with different activities there?
Well, it's really important now that we get people out into the regions. They've had a tough time too, especially the bushfire affected regions like East Gippsland. So part of the reason we've stopped running the FIT day tour is so that we can focus all of our energy on multi-day tours that go into the regions where people are needed the most. So the area around Melbourne, look, it's lovely, it's terrific, but frankly, it doesn't mind if we're there or if we're not there with our little groups of 10 or 8. Whereas at Orbost in East Gippsland, if we're taking 8 people there for 4 days, that makes a huge difference to the local economy. So we're going to be just putting everything we have into those regional tours, those multi-day tours. And the great thing about a multi-day tour is you can do more conservation stuff on it. So on every single one of our tours, we've increased the conservation component. So it's not going to be 5 minutes anymore. It's going to be half an hour every day. And I am not afraid of this at all, because I think this is what people are going to want when they come back, when they get back out there. And the amount of good we can do, like Pia was saying, just by being there and seeing animals, especially in an area that's been bushfire affected. We just recently ran a birders weekend over at Nakita in East Gippsland, and because of the people who were there, we found that there was actually a little bird, a southern emu wren, had survived the fires in enough numbers to start to recover. No one knew that until that happened. And it's just from ordinary people with cameras taking records of what they see and then submitting them to online databases so that scientists can use it.
Yeah, fantastic. Another region I did want to cover as well is Mungo. So this is something that has been available the past season or two, but it's something that you are going to have a renewed focus on moving forward. One of the interesting things in discussions with yourself was the reason you formed that tour, not only to see obviously some bush species outside of Victoria, totally different to what you get on the coast, but also to highlight that climate change impact that you were talking about. Can you share with us how you came about designing that experience and a bit about what we can expect with that one for next year?
Well, Mungo's a really interesting place because everything about Mungo is about climate change, but in a previous era, and it wasn't human-caused climate change. That was Ice Age. And so one of the days we're going to a place called Hatta Kalkai National Park, which is on the Victorian side of the border, and it has a beautiful lake, a bunch of beautiful lakes that have water in them. And it's got huge river red gum trees around the outside, and it's magic. It's just fantastic. And then we go into Mungo, which is an extinct lake. So Lake Mungo has no water in it and hasn't had for 20,000 years. And it doesn't have trees, basically. It has low shrubby bushes. It's the outback. And the only way you know it's a lake is because it's a slightly lower and very flat landscape in a relatively flat landscape. So by showing people one place that's in a process of change and another place that's already changed, and then getting them to think, well, hang on, this is climate change and this is happening in front of our eyes, by getting them to notice the animals, everything, including reptiles, plants, birds, mammals, and take photographs of them now. And because it's an arid area, it's changing really fast. Submitting those records to online databases, and scientists will be able to use that information to tell and to see change actually happening. But more importantly, our visitors can see what this means. You know, climate change means that the places in Australia with water and trees are turning into desert. It's pretty severe, but I think we need to see it to really understand what it's going to mean.
Yeah. No, it's a really exciting program and a really important cause, of course. And the other thing I want to highlight as well is that we've talked a lot about the conservation opportunities and those multi-day experiences, but it also means a better wildlife experience as well. So often when you're doing the day trip, there's so many different variables, but with a multi-day, whether it be 2, 3 or 4 days, it just gives you so much more opportunity to engage with the different habitats and, of course, the species that you guys see in day in, day out. So I think it's really exciting and very much looking forward to achieving that. Was it 300,000 you mentioned?
300,000 trees by 2030.
Wow. I did not know that yet, so that's incredible. Well done.
Yeah.
All right, well, we will do it. Unfortunately, we're going to have to move up to far North Queensland, though, and we'll come back with a couple more questions, Janine, I promise. But now we are going to head up with James. How are you?
G'day, John. Thanks very much. That was great to hear, Janine. That's really, really awesome. There's some tremendous figures. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Hope you have a good morning.
So, James, you've been operating for, I think, the best part of 5 years now. We love your work up there with Far North Queensland Rescue and various things that you're involved with. But something that you offer that is unique is that real focus on small groups, typically sort of your 7 passengers. So you're getting that real in-depth interpretation and really catering to that market that is your wildlife and nature enthusiasts. And there's not too many places or better places around the world than Far North Queensland, of course. So many of us, including myself, when we think about Far North Queensland or Cairns, we think the Great Barrier Reef, and that's understandable, of course. But something I wanted to really discuss with you is what's so unique about the land opportunities up there, land touring with wildlife and the biodiversity up there?
Yeah, it's interesting, John. If you wind the clock back maybe 10 years, not many people knew about, the rainforest. And if you look in the history books, and if you look into a little bit of the research that was going on back then, even the scientists didn't really know what was going on in the rainforest. So we had to wait a lot of years for people to start poking around and DNA testing and looking for the plant record and the fossils. So in a very short time, we went from having a 30,000-year-old rainforest to having a 180 million-year-old rainforest. So at the moment, the average international visitor spends 6 days in Cairns. And it just blows my mind that 4 of those days are dedicated to rainforest days. And 2 of them are for reef days. So, for example, you might spend a day on an island, and you might spend a day swimming out at the outer barrier reef with turtles and white-tip reef sharks. But it's really, really exciting to see. And it's truly this very small fragment of Australia that's dominated by tropical rainforest. I think at the moment it's 0.2%. So you've got this insane biodiversity of mammals and invertebrates, and butterflies and tree kangaroos. And nearly half of Australia's birds are found in 0.2% of the Australian continent. So it's really, really exciting to see that we're spending more time in the rainforest. It's been my passion now for many, many years. It's very exciting to share those secrets with some of the beautiful landscapes, gorges and wildlife with others. So yeah, it's truly a unique world out there for such a small percent of the country. And it's like a living museum. The more time you spend out there, the more things you discover. It's really exciting.
And what are some of the lesser known species that you're excited to share with guests, and hopefully that you're seeing on tour more often than perhaps you did before, now that you know where a lot of them are living and all the research that you've been doing?
Yeah, as the years go on, we're getting pretty good at finding all of these elusive and tricky critters. We've got some really wonderful private property access areas now, so things are a lot easier than they used to be when we used to poke around the boardwalks in the national park. So we're quite lucky nowadays. But talking about the rainforest being a very small fragment of Australia, I kind of look at it, which I've talked to John, I've talked to you about this before. It's kind of like a life raft. It's a biological life raft. And on one side, we've got the Great Dividing Range, which stretches all the way down to Janine's place and runs all the way up to the tip of Cape York. And on the other side, we have the Great Barrier Reef. So there's this green ribbon of tropical rainforest. Now that means some of the species that live here in this small fragment of Australia can be found nowhere else in Australia and nowhere else in the world. So we're talking about saltwater crocodiles in the Indo-Pacific region, the southern cassowary, which I just had a really exceptional moment on a 4-day tour a few days ago. I don't know if you've seen the photo yet, John, but I bet you did handstands and backflips when you saw it. Really wonderful to see living dinosaurs, cassowaries, tree kangaroos. It's not just our friends over in the UK and Europe that don't know about tree kangaroos. Most of us Australians don't even know that we have tree kangaroos living up there in the high canopy of the tropical rainforest. So yeah, the wildlife experiences are really unusual. You're going to see something that you'll probably never ever see again, and that's the sort of experience that we want to create with our guests.
Yeah, and one way that you're doing that is with the nocturnal experience. And you've mentioned that a lot of people have perhaps come across or visited the Daintree and done the day tour, but unfortunately most people miss out the Daintree when it's at its liveliest, I guess, and that's when all the marsupials in particular are coming out. So can you share a bit about that experience and what people can expect with that one?
Yeah, you really nailed it. There's so many different ways of visiting the region, but what we tried to do a couple of years ago was put together something that allows us to get more. We want to create the most immersive, eco-friendly experiences we can. And what we come to realize is that driving from Cairns or Port Douglas, which is the next major town here, up to the Daintree, you might be spending an hour and a half in the vehicle with a beautiful view of the ocean on the way, but once you get up there, you're getting pretty close to the middle of the day. And, some animals are moving around in the middle of the day. There's a lot of bird life, but some of the mammals and some of the animals that have fur, big eyes and big ears, they come out in the crepuscular time of the day, or maybe they're completely nocturnal. So we created a tour we call the Daintree Nocturnal, Daintree Afternoon Tour, which actually starts in the middle of the day. So we quite often get people that might fly in to Cairns, and then you can spend the morning grabbing a coffee along the Esplanade, and then you can jump on the tour, and we take a maximum of 7. And before you know it, you're on a riverboat cruise looking for kingfishers and crocodiles. It's David White on his beautiful solar-powered vessel up there in the mangroves. And then you're in the rainforest walking on foot, and that's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So anyone that's spent a little bit of time in nature, you'll find that those first couple of hours and those last couple of hours at the end of the day are just gold. That's when the magic is happening. So all of the day operators are leaving the park, and here we are. We've got this entire national park to ourselves. And the guides, I mean, I don't get to talk to the customers as much apart from the reviews that come in, but the guides just rave about how awesome this tour is, because you're getting in and having the whole place to yourself. Everything's getting really excited. You've got this gorgeous 2-course dinner with a glass of red wine, and then you're heading out with with Matt or Calvin. You've got the torches, and you're looking for all the weird and wonderful things that come out at night. And just turning your torch off in the middle of the night and just listening to everything. Like after the wet season, we've got this abundance of frogs. I think on my best night this wet season passing, I found 6 different species of frogs in a 1.2 kilometre boardwalk.
Wow,
that's really exceptional.
You are the man.
Well, they make a lot of noise.
Yeah. Just on that, something I did want to touch base on is the partnerships that you've got running. So something that's new for everyone on the line is a 4-day conservation safari that you've started, which incorporates a couple of not-for-profit partners, which is terrific. Could you run through those 2 partners and just what prompted that partnership and what it means for guests?
Yeah, it's first of all, a lot of the inspiration comes from organisations like Echidna, Walkabout, from Janine. Every time I run into a wall, I give Janine a call. She's got amazing advice on bridging tourism and conservation components. So big shout out to you, Janine. Thanks so much, because just today I've been working on the 2022 itineraries, and they are just tremendous. I'm so excited just writing the words down, and it's just amazing. So what we're doing is we're taking a 4-day nature and wildlife tour, which is already super cool because you're waking up in the wild. You don't have to travel. You're right there. You've got the dawn chorus right there when you're having your bowl of cereal. So each day is kind of fantastic enough as it is. But how do we leave something back, and how do we contribute to the health and the wealth of the region so that when we leave, not only do we feel super special on the inside, but we're leaving the place greener and better off. So at the moment, we're working with the Australian Qual Conservancy, and the guys there, they're really unsung heroes. One of the guys is a really good friend of mine, and everything that they do is behind the scenes, and you don't see what's going on. But the northern qual and the spotted tail qual, really exceptional animals. You've never seen a carnivorous marsupial like this. Even myself, seeing them in the wild would be far trickier. So you get to go out with these researchers, and you can check camera traps and learn about everything that's going on, their movements, their breeding. They only live for about 4 years. So it's really intense research. And I'll tell you what, John, next year is getting bigger and better because we're incorporating Karen from Tree Roo Rescue. I'm wearing Karen's T-shirt. She rescues the Lumholtz tree kangaroos on the Atherton tablelands when they might run into a wild dog or there's a vehicle strike or something like that. And there's all over North Queensland, there are these real unsung heroes, and we want to connect our small group of nature-minded travellers with these real conservationists, and we want to contribute to their research and expose what they're doing. We've also got tomorrow I'm heading up to meet a raptor carer on the tablelands, which she might be keen on jumping on next year's tour. So much happening, and it's all good feels, John.
Terrific. Just for those that might not know what a qual is, can you describe sort of what it looks like? Because I don't have a picture, unfortunately, but what does it look like? What do they do? And how many of them are there, the spotted quals up your way?
Oh, spotted tail quals, I think the last time I talked to Alberto up here, there's about 250.
Okay,
so there's really not many at all. And he knows exactly where they are. And he's got I think he's got about 6 or 7 people in his team. And they've got really, really good data entry about like where each group are living, and their numbers have actually done really well in the last few years because we haven't had any major cyclones. So that's the same as a hurricane for our friends that never heard of what a cyclone is. We're just talking about really intense ocean-borne storms that come across the Coral Sea and they can hit land. We haven't had a really big one since 2011. So there are some animals that are seeing a lot of success in their breeding because they rely on a lot of fruit And then the insects and small rodents that live off that fruit, that becomes a part of the food web for the, I'm going to describe it as a cat. It's like a cat with big teeth. They're related to the extinct thylacine, the Tasmanian devil. So really unique animals. And they're actually doing pretty well considering, but they need a lot more help. And we are helping them out big time this year with their equipment and the amount of time that they can get out in the field with more of a team, which is just awesome.
Well done, mate. That's great to hear. And all those new exciting developments for next year, it's just fantastic to hear that on the horizon. All right, I'm going to ask the other panellists to rejoin because I've got a couple of group questions. I might start out with Pia. And the question is, hello again, what are you particularly excited about learning the next 12 months? So all three of you are doing a lot of research and observation day in, day out as part of tours, of course. Is there one particular question that you're really hoping to learn the answer to?
Do you want to answer that one, Nakita?
So basically, I think what we're sort of excited about is the whale migration. It feels like it's changing. We're seeing things at different times of the year that we'd never seen before. So Naturalist Charters has been in business for 28 years and it's always been like clockwork every single year. But the last couple of ones, our seasons have just been changing. Even in Bremer Bay this year, we've never seen humpbacks out at the canyon, and to see humpbacks out there this year, that blue whale with the tiny wee calf, it really is just blowing our minds, like what is going on? It's really quite exciting. It's a bit nervous as well, what's happening, why are these whales doing that? But I guess the more we do it, the more time we take, we'll get a bit of understanding. Hopefully everything is going to be okay and nothing too drastic is going on, but there are some pretty big questions that are starting to loom around. Why are we seeing these whales so early?
Yeah, that variability, I think it points to the fact that it's even more important that we're studying them day in, day out to try and understand what's going on with all the different factors. I might turn it across to you, Janine. What are you excited about learning the next 12 months?
Well, now keep this secret, all right, all of you. But I've proposed a research project with Victoria's top koala scientists to find out where the koalas actually are west of Melbourne, because this research has never been done. And she's keen. So we're going to do it with Deakin University. And I'm going to be part of it, which is really exciting. And Koala Clancy Foundation is going to fund it, which terrific. Is really big. It's really big for us. So, but the government won't fund it because in Victoria they think koalas are fine, and I know they're not, and the scientists know they're not. So we're going to go and prove it.
Oh, that's terrific news, Janine. I didn't know about that, and we'll keep that secret. No? And lastly, James, what are you excited about learning the next 12 months?
Well, we a couple of years ago, we got access to a private property, which you know about, John. It's the Shared Earth Reserve owned by a conservation group, Forever Wild. There's 5,000 acres of lakes and creeks and wetlands up there. What I've been really excited about, because it's only been a couple of years, is just watching how some animals and birds and quals in particular are returning to these areas due to significant natural land management. So there's now a full-time ranger on site in the reserve, and we were actually a part of one of the burns last year, one of the controlled burns up there. And within a couple of months, there were 250 brolers that arrived on site, and no one has seen anything like that for about 15 years, which is just unbelievable. So what I'm excited about is seeing how feral pest management, feral weed control, fire management, and just really good environmentally friendly land management can increase opportunities for animals to breed and feed, and hopefully some of them become permanent residents at the reserve. So every time Kelvin or Matt or myself, we go out on the reserve, we document our findings. And right now we're just noticing some really exciting trends. And not just that, but the way that we're viewing the wildlife is really, really different, because there's no one except us has been up there for so many years. We are being as sort of soft core and ethical as we possibly can in doing everything. And we're finding that every time we go in the same sort of clothes, the same sort of cameras, without really putting in much effort, we're able to get closer and closer and closer to these species. So it's interesting watching the human interaction and how these relationships are developing, because there's no noisy lawnmowers or bus groups of people or anything like that. So there's two things that I'm super excited about in the future.
Yeah, I think that's an awesome note to wrap up on. I should say that, all these examples that we've just given on how tourism can make a difference. So that's something that we're all looking forward to. It's obviously a challenging time, but I think ending on a positive note that all these amazing ways that travellers can get engaged with helping our wildlife in the future. So thank you all. Really appreciate your time. And I found it fascinating. Some of those things I had no idea about, and I'm sure our viewers did as well. So on that note, thank you. And I'm now going to wrap it up and pass it back to Sally.
And if you could all just stay here just for a minute, I just love to see your smiling faces. Thank you so much for joining us. I know personally, sitting here in London in a very urban environment, just listening to you talk has been good for my soul. And I can't wait to get back out into the Australian bush and in the water, and because it is such a nourishing experience. And I think you're right, Janine, that when people do start travelling again, especially people from this part of the world, this type of wildlife experience is going to be just what the doctor ordered. And the crossover between tourism and conservation and doing travel for good as well is just so inspiring. So I really appreciate you all taking the time to talk to us all. We have a couple of little questions, well, not questions so much coming in, but just feedback from the audience, just saying it was so great session, very inspiring. So I feel what I'm saying is probably being echoed by a lot of us up here. Thank you all for your time. We really appreciate it. There are no specific questions, so I'll let you all go. And John, love your work. We'll talk to you soon. So thank you all. And for everyone who's watching, we'll be back in, I think it's 2 months' time, and the focus of the webinar will be Australia's food and drink. So until then, take care and have a great day. Bye.